The impact of occult and esoteric ideas on the arts in the mid-19th century culminated in a new artistic movement, symbolism, which reached its peak towards the end of the 19th century. The main driving forces of symbolism, such as spirituality, revelation, and dematerialization, were closely tied to Hermetic and esoteric beliefs. Due to the profound impact of the works and authors of this movement, its aesthetic theories and themes have significantly influenced later artistic developments like modernism and surrealism. Artists within this movement were no longer satisfied with the old paradigm of the window to the world. Instead of replicating a tangible reality as it appeared before their eyes, they turned inward to the world of dreams, fantasies, nightmares, visions, hallucinations, ancient myths, the occult, revelations, and mysticism. However, this was not a quest for new themes merely to shock the bourgeoisie. Both the aesthetic and conceptual attitudes they developed stemmed from a deeply rooted philosophical foundation in occultism, as we will explore throughout this video. Only in the past 2 decades have art historians recognized the need to re-evaluate their narratives regarding symbolism. This movement reflected one of the most extensive ideological shifts within Western culture of its time. At that moment, a noticeable change in attitude seemed to occur. Elements previously excluded from Western art and culture, or presented cryptically, as in the Renaissance, gradually emerged to be displayed openly. Why did this happen? Well, there are several reasons, but perhaps one stands out above the rest. In 1870, the city of Rome and the Vatican were captured by the Italian Unification Army. The Pope was imprisoned within a Vatican that no longer belonged to him, as it had been expropriated by the newly established Italian Republic. What did this mean? The old cultural paradigm, at least in the West, began to transform into a new one. A century earlier, addressing themes like those of the symbolist movement would have resulted in a visit from the Inquisition, imprisonment, torture, or even execution by fire. But a new paradigm now existed. The initiated artists of the time experienced a kind of freedom they had never known before. No authority could stop them from expressing their beliefs and exploring the themes that truly moved them. This entire sociocultural process reached its climax in the arts, which is our focus today, the symbolist aesthetics of the second half of the 19th century. Art historians consider the ideological origins of the movement to lie in Les Fleurs du Mal, the most famous work of Charles Baudelaire. Another initiate, Edgar Allan Poe, also played a decisive role in the movement, providing many of the images and literary figures that would be utilized. The origins of symbolism are often explained as an artistic reaction against naturalism and realism, anti-idealist movements that exalted everyday life and placed it above idealism. Art historians also frequently discuss another conflict, that between symbolism and science. The symbolist poet Albert Aurier declared that mysticism alone had the potential to save modern society from brutality. However, opposition to science in general was more rhetorical than literal. The positivism of science served as a useful opponent in the self-reflection of symbolist artists, a necessary mirror. But in truth, many scientific ideas were integrated into their art. According to Aurier, mathematics was the only true, exact, and rational science, and there was none of that elsewhere. He argued that mathematics was closely linked to mysticism, while modern natural sciences were inaccurate and incapable of producing precise solutions. Aurier further claimed that, due to this incapacity, natural sciences inevitably led to skepticism and fear of thought itself. Although this was a multidisciplinary movement, including literature, sculpture, music, and other artistic fields, it is the visual arts that we will focus on. In this domain, the turn towards the occult was also reflected in a growing questioning of established pictorial norms, primarily through the introduction of a new kind of visual ambiguity. Although the Symbolist art school expanded rapidly across Europe, with great exponents in various countries, it originated in France. Coincidentally, or for those who believe in coincidence, France at that time was a hub for several esoteric movements gaining popularity: spiritualism, theosophy, modern Rosicrucianism, Martinism, ritual magic, and various phenomena that began to be labeled as parapsychology were among the themes that ignited both debate and creativity in many artists. These new ideologies were disseminated through lectures, public conferences, and numerous articles in newspapers and magazines. Initiated artists saw themselves as visionaries of a new era, where art would play an essential role in society, the creation of a universal brotherhood, and a new cultural paradigm that was taking shape. The term symbolist was first coined by the critic Jean Moraes, who, in a manifesto published in 1886, defined symbolism as an enemy of teaching, declamation, full sensitivity, and objective description. In essence, symbolist artists believed that the goal of art should be to develop the most transcendental truths, which could only be obtained through ambiguous and unorthodox methods. Moraes's Symbolist Manifesto also stated, "In our art, scenes of nature, human actions, and the rest of existing phenomena will not be named to express themselves. Instead, they will serve as sensitive platforms meant to show their esoteric affinities with primordial ideals." In the 1915 book Small Religions of Paris, the renowned French occultist Jules Bois painted a vibrant picture of various cults and movements from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. From the so-called last pagans to Swedenborgians, Theosophists, Kabbalists, Gnostics, and others, Bois highlighted how all these currents provided numerous ideas to the artistic world. When these two worlds, esotericism and art, merged, art emerged as a new religion and artists as its prophets. While it is difficult to formulate a definition that encompasses the entirety of the symbolist thesis, this diversity should not overshadow the commonalities among the various artists and the theoretical dimensions associated with symbolism. Now, you may wonder, were there real connections between the artists of this movement and occult orders or secret societies? Absolutely. In 1888, two renowned occultists, the Marquis Stanislas de Guaita and Josephin Péladan, founded the Kabbalistic Order of the Rosy Cross. Occultism experts assert that Pappus, an associate of the founders and a member of the organization, composed the rituals and structure of this order, which were practically identical to his Martinist order, the Order of Unknown Superiors. The issue arose when Péladan, under the pretext of rejecting operative magic, left the group in 1891 to establish his own organization, the Rosicrucian Order of the Temple and the Grail. The following year, this lodge organized a series of events that lasted from 1892 to 1897 and were called the Salon de la Rose Croix. Can you guess what these events were about? They were a series of art exhibitions held in some of Paris's most exclusive galleries, showcasing only symbolist style or related artworks. Péladan, the poet Saint-Paul Roux, and the Count of Rochefoucauld published the so-called Rosicrucian Commandments on Aesthetics, which included the following declaration: "All ordinary representations of contemporary life are forbidden, as are all domestic animals or those used for sport, flowers, still lifes, fruits, tools, and other themes that painters insolently expose. Instead, to favor the Christian ideal and mysticism, the order will only accept works founded on legend, myth, allegory, and dreams." The Salon de la Rose Croix was the first attempt at a modern international religion of art, an aesthetic order with Péladan as its high priest. Péladan was born in Lyon in 1858 into a family with rather peculiar tendencies. His father, Louis, was a conservative Catholic writer who tried to establish a sect called the Cult of the Wound in the left shoulder of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Péladan's older brother, Adrian, authored a medical text proposing that the brain was sustained by unused sperm, which took the form of a vital liquid. When Adrian prematurely died of accidental strychnine poisoning, Peladon perpetuated his ideas, suggesting that intellectual growth could only thrive through the suppression of sexual impulses. Moreover, the Peladon family's political opinions were entirely reactionary. They despised democracy and advocated for the restoration of the monarchy. Peladon differed from many other occultists in insisting that his Rosicrucian rhetoric was an extension of a hypothetical true Catholic doctrine, which, according to him, modern church institutions had degenerated. In the art world, Peladon first made a name for himself as a critic, especially denouncing naturalism and impressionism, which he deemed banal. Some of his favorite works included those by Puvis de Chavannes, Gustave Moreau, and the diabolical caricatures of Félicien Rops, which I won't be able to display in this video to avoid issues with YouTube. However, I will include them in the description on our website. Peladon's oscillations between piety and depravity were very common and, indeed, characteristic of the environment in which he moved. Peladon believed in the alchemical power of the artist, the divine nature of creation, and the oracular ability of genius. The question that would have been interesting to ask him is, did he truly mean what he said, or was he a lunatic or a charlatan? Of course, such a question presupposes a clear line between what is real and what is false, and in matters of the spirit, that line is not easily defined. Obviously, the term symbolism is derived from the word symbol, but do you truly know what it means? This word originates from the Latin symbolum, meaning symbol of faith, and symbolus, meaning sign of recognition. Both in turn stem from the classical Greek symbolon, which was an object used in mystical cults, a ceramic token that was broken in half and served as a tool of recognition when the holders reunited the two halves. The use of the symbolon was so effective that it began to be employed by emissaries initiated in allied city-states. As we interpret them today, ideograms, symbols were the method of human communication before writing, a complex system that often held multiple levels of meaning. Symbols were the initial foundation of all human understanding and served as the first conceptual vehicles for knowledge. This was true for tens of thousands of years. That is why symbols not only have a powerful visual impact on us, but can also directly access our subconscious without being filtered by our intellect. On this topic, linguist and art historian Heinrich Zimmer, in his book Signs and Symbols, explains that concepts and words are symbols, as are visions, rituals, and images. Through every symbol, a transcendent reality is reflected. A symbol is a visual image that represents an idea. It is the deepest indicator of a universal truth. And as this linguist points out, this is why we still use symbols. Every major religion is represented by one, as are political parties and the world's largest companies. The power of symbols is immense, far beyond what the average person imagines. It is a form of language that we understand without consciously realizing that we do. For this reason, artists of the symbolist movement skillfully harnessed this knowledge to express their beliefs and philosophies. Interestingly, symbolism did not develop through a single, unified style. This makes it difficult to define in rigid terms. It can be better understood as a blend of individual artistic styles linked more by concept than by aesthetic line. Symbolist artists sought to redefine art and restore the spirit they believed had been lost with Impressionism and Naturalism. They therefore gravitated towards spirituality and esoteric and mystical positions. Their themes often included angels, or more accurately, the entities typically represented as angels, mythological figures, supernatural creatures, Prometheus, Lucifer, Venus, the sun, the moon, death, resurrection, beauty, the grotesque, mysticism, eschatology, magic, Kabbalistic themes, and ritualism. In all their works, there is a palpable interest in the subjective, the irrational, and the instinctive. The characteristics of the symbol were not aimed at representing a specific object, but at its allegorical use, always guiding the viewer toward the supernatural, or, more precisely, the supranatural. The artist did not aim to portray an ordinary or habitual world, but an extraordinary reality reached through the symbol. The symbolists challenged conventional modes of representation in an effort to access the divine directly. Their ideas were expressed in forms that displayed a deep familiarity with esoteric and occult theories. Magnus Enkel, a Finnish symbolist, when asked to describe himself as an artist, presented himself as a neophyte in the process of initiation, entering the ruins of an ancient pagan temple, moving from one chamber to another, deeper and deeper into the unknown. According to him, with each step, he left behind earthly pleasures, hopes, and aspirations, but continued with the firm belief that he would be rewarded upon reaching the final chamber, the inner sanctuary, where everything will be revealed to our eyes and restored to our hearts. The concepts and affiliations of symbolism were perfectly clear. Interestingly, symbolist works did not necessarily have a single interpretation. They aimed for each piece to evoke different responses from each viewer. Moreover, symbolists inherited and skillfully employed the esoteric theories of color that emerged during Romanticism. Along with numerology and other symbolic languages, they added another layer of encryption to their expressions, moving beyond mere interpretation of action. In other words, they used the allegorical meaning of each color and number, applying it according to its significance in the actions they depicted. While many artists were part of this movement, perhaps the most notable include Jean Delville, Pierre Puvis de Chavannes, Odilon Redon, Gustave Moreau, Edward Robert Hughes, Franz von Stuck, Herbert James Draper, and Gustav Klimt. However, I must admit, these are probably just my personal favorites. There are over 100 visual artists associated with the symbolist movement. In the aftermath of two catastrophic world wars, mysticism began to lose its luster. The static liturgies of the fin de siècle sounded distant, and a new ritual of supposed objectivity took hold. This does not mean that the supernatural was erased from the history of modernism's origins. Rather, it was absorbed and normalized. Many artists continue to use arcane symbols without even knowing their meanings, valuing them for their artistic appeal rather than their occult utility. In the narrative many of us learned in school, the upheavals of the modernist era were presented as individual developments and autonomous events within each discipline. Before symbolism faded from cultural memory, it received a few nods from emerging giants of modernism. In 1906, Ezra Pound embraced Péladan's idea that the medieval troubadour tradition was a repository of hermetic wisdom. In 1910, Vasily Kandinsky cited Péladan in his manifesto concerning the spiritual in art, where he wrote the following: "The artist is a king, as Péladan says, not only because he possesses great power, but also because his responsibility is immense." This phrase, oddly prophetic and frequently heard in modern times, from Spider-Man comics to global advertising campaigns, is evidence of the persistent reverberations that occultism has had in modern culture. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this journey and learned a bit more about symbolism, which, I must confess, is my favorite artistic period. Throughout the video, I wanted to share some of my favorite paintings from this movement, works that not only inspire me, but also reflect the deep mystery and spirituality that define this remarkable art form. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. Which symbolist artist or artwork would you like us to analyze in a future video on this channel? Leave your suggestions in the comments, as it's always a pleasure to discover new perspectives and share this passion for art with all of you. I'd also like to remind you that if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by purchasing your favorite painting from our website. This way, you'll receive a high-quality piece, as faithful as possible to the original artwork, to treasure for a lifetime. Plus, your purchase helps keep the channel running for free, allowing us to continue creating videos like this one. Thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. See you soon.